And welcome to Around the Ozarks Spotlight. Each week we uncover the stories behind the people who live and work in Southwest Missouri. Those individuals with entrepreneurial spirit who work to better the lives of others or put pen to paper to write books about the stories and history of the Ozarks and its people. I'm your host, Scott Meier, and today we're going to explore the world of local radio broadcasting and its history with two former Springfield radio greats. We've got Dan O'Day and Malcolm Hukriede, who have both co-authored a soon-to-be-released book entitled The History of Springfield Radio. Hello, boys. How we doing?
Doing fine.
Hey, thanks for calling us boys.
Well, hey, as far as I'm concerned, we're all boys, right? Until we're not here anymore, we're boys.
Gotcha.
I've had a good run here in the last few weeks of being able to talk to some radio folks about the things that are near and dear to both of all three of us in radio, and that is, how does it work behind the scenes, and what do we see? The two of you, and let's start with Dan O'Day. Dan's in the upper part of the picture there. Hey, Dan.
Cardinal fan.
Started out, and he's a Cardinal fan. Now, Dan, your history goes back how long in the Springfield radio market?
My 20th birthday, January of 1966.
And where are you from originally?
West Plains, or outside West Plains, Missouri, Pottersville, actually.
All right, so you're a Missouri kid, and at 20, you decided once you're out of high school, you're going to drop everything and get into radio. Is that fair?
Actually, I started to work in 63 at KU Radio, Willow Springs. It's off the air now, but every hour it was cuckoo, cuckoo. Sort of set.
And that was the time check. Is that
that was right?
Now, Dan, to be fair, you're from back in the days when people used to be assigned radio names. And Dan O'Day is not your actual name, is it?
Well, I went on the air and I'll try to keep it short, Malcolm. I went on the air with my real name in Willow Springs as Clyde Williams. That's me. Mm-hmm. I moved to Springfield and took the air name Bill Williams because Jerry Higley, one of the greats of Springfield radio, mentioned very often in this book, by the way, said we need to change the name. And I brought it up because Clyde was a put down of the Rat Pack. Clyde was the favorite put down of Frank Sinatra.
Oh, really?
And the KGBX radio AM that I went to work for, that was in 66. I came back out of the Army and there was a guy on television, KY3, named Bill Williams. So Gary Hightower, one of the radio greats across America, he was a dear friend of mine. We'd worked together as late as 68. And we changed my name from Dan Day to Dan O'Day in about 30 seconds when he hired me at KWTO in 72 when I came back out of the United States of Army.
Okay, so that's so you've been Dan O'Day, really, at least in the radio business, since 1972.
For 50 years. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great story. Malcolm, let's get down to you here because we all know if we let Dan tell all the stories, he will. And to be fair to the two of you, we're going to have to bounce back and forth. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's start the clock now.
So Malcolm Hukriede, your history in Springfield started when?
76.
That was in Springfield radio, but I mean, you go back. Yeah. You're born and raised?
Oh yeah. Born 1949. Went to Boyd, Eugene Field School at Glendale, and then SMS.
Okay, SMS and SMS. You were kind of an athlete, were you not?
4-year defensive back, letterman. Yes, I was.
Okay.
For that time, yes.
And what was your major? What were you majoring in?
Marketing.
Other than football, what were you majoring in?
Other than football, staying out of the Army, number 1, and marketing, number 2.
So what got you into radio? Why did you get into radio in Springfield?
It's funny, and we can talk about it later, but I was working retail at Colony Magnavox on the mall, and I just had enough of working till 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. So I was driving home, and I heard a audition ad by the general manager at Kick. It said, a recruiting ad that said, come talk to us. And it just so happened, this general manager, I knew him. I played with his son. He lived a block over. So I called him and set up an interview, talked to him, then talked to the general sales manager, Dave Dugan, and got hired.
And to be on the air? No,
in sales.
Oh, in sales. Okay.
Yes, I've never been on air that I know of or remember.
So what did they pull you in on the sales side with? The fact you wouldn't have to work till 10 o'clock at night?
Outside sales, yes. And it was exciting to work for a radio station. At that time when
Okay.
I joined, it was the top station in the city.
Because everybody's got a story about why they got into radio, and those are two good ones. But to sit down and take the time to write this book, here it is 50 years later for both of you, right? From the time that you got into the business. What was the catalyst that got you both started on wanting to write a book about the history of Springfield radio? Dan?
Leaving a footprint. This book is, Malcolm, I think, wrote 9 or 10 pages. I wrote 3 or 4, and there are 47 other people who contributed their story. And that's what Malcolm and I think is the great thing about the book. I made a couple of notes. Pardon me, Malcolm, I promise to be brief. We have 16 announcers, 8 newsmen, 10 salespeople, 5 general managers, what we call in the business support people that basically keep the ship going, for crying out loud.
Make the commercials run, right? Make the commercials run and the records play, right?
4 owners, 2 advertisers that got into their business, coming literally out of radio into business, an engineer, 2 nationally known personalities, Jim Bohannon, who replaced Larry King on radio, and unfortunately he passed away this past November.
Yeah, and a great guy.
Oh, I was just talking to a dear friend of mine in Wisconsin, and he just went on and on about Jim Bohannon. Jim was born and raised in Lebanon, Missouri, and then Malcolm's priest when he was very young, Father Harry Schlitt, and Father Harry went on to be on literally hundreds and hundreds of stations, and Malcolm can tell read the book and get Father Harry's story. 2 sports
available
directors
at Amazon.
Huh? Yeah.
Available at Amazon.
Yes.
Google and Amazon.
3 script writers, people that do that sort of thing. 2 sports directors, both of whom are Ned Reynolds and Art Haynes, probably the 2 most. Both are members of the Missouri Broadcasters Hall of Fame, I think.
Yes.
2 business owners, the nationally known people, the first African American to work in radio in Springfield, I believe. Great fella, Cedric Grendel, and Cedric is a dear friend of ours, and a couple of ladies who claim to be the first female in radio. Okay. Sorry, but that's sort of the story of 49 people.
My guest today on Around the Ozark Spotlight, you're hearing both Dan O'Day and Malcolm Hukriede. Dan spending a lot of his time over at what is now, was the Journal Company, now Summit Media, and Malcolm spending a lot of his time at what is currently Midwest Family Radio. Malcolm, who came up with the idea?
I did. I was nearing the end of my career, and I just thought, hey, I don't know of a book like this. And having worked in Springfield almost 100% of my career, I said, I just know a lot of people, and they've got a lot of great stories. So let's just call them, see if they'll write us a story and accumulate it and publish it. And we never meant to make a whole lot of money. And if we do, fine, but it'll go back into the next book. So we just kind of did it.
There'll be another book.
Yes, I think it'll be easier than this book because we'll have something to actually show them. Trying to tell them what we were trying to accomplish was kind of tough.
There are so many people that we wanted to have involved in this book, and it was just like herding cats, and we couldn't persuade them to do it. And now I think we will with this. Dan,
you before we went on the air, you were able to take a moment and show me what the book looks like. You've got pre-printing, right? You could show our viewing audience what it looks like.
I think is it.
Yep. You can see there the history of radio in Springfield, Missouri. And what does it say on the back? What's the back say?
Stories from behind the mic and all around from those who made radio a part of everyday life. This is a series of recollections and interviews provided by the prominent leaders of radio across the Springfield landscape.
Now, I couldn't help but notice, since I've been in management and radio now for the last about 30 years of my career, that you had only a few of them that you talked to. Is that because most of us pass early because of all the pressure of managing guys like you? Malcolm, you could start with that one, Malcolm.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It was, and the reason we don't have any is either the ones we asked didn't participate, or there's just not a whole lot left.
Right. It's a tough business.
If I might,
Yes,
let me. Now, you were addressing the question of general managers and that sort of thing,
right?
Just a second. Rex Hansen, who managed.
This is called dead air. If we were on the air,
yeah.
I remember that well. Rex Hansen,
yeah.
Rick McCoy, you're involved in it, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
And Kurt Boney,
who passed quite a few years ago, right? Kurt Boney is still alive. He's down in Joplin, right?
And unfortunately, my dear friend and mentor, Kurt Brown, will have to construct a story for him. You could
probably go to somebody we all know pretty well, Mark Spinabella, because every other word out of Mark's mouth, whenever you're talking about radio, he injects Kurt Brown. We could be talking about the weather, and he'll say, it's kind of a day that Kurt Brown would have really liked. He idolized Kurt Brown.
Well, so did I. Kurt was a legend in the industry before you came to the market. He was a member of the country music broadcasters. At one time he had the largest news staff in the country, larger than KMOX's in a market of 150,000 people.
Sure.
Kurt will be mentioned in a lot of stories in this book, and all very favorable. I mean, he was liked by everyone. And
he was involved in Springfield radio for how long, Malcolm?
You'd have to ask Dan on that one.
I think he came to the market in I know that he came to the market in the late 50s or early 60s.
Okay, so he's one of the true pioneers of broadcast radio in Springfield.
I would say certainly out of that. The pioneer is Ralph Foster, who started KWTO AM in 1933. Radio started in Springfield 100 years ago this year.
Is that right?
And the first significant radio station that stayed on the air was under the call letters KGBX AM, and that's when Mr. Foster brought it here from St. Joe, Missouri, in 1926.
Now, Malcolm mentioned before the broadcast, Dan, that you actually knew Marconi. Is that fair?
No, but no, I didn't know Marconi. I knew the other fellow that claimed to run radio, but I can't remember his name, the one that was the competitor to Thomas, whoever invented the light bulb.
Oh, Edison. That Thomas Edison. Malcolm, obviously Dan has been on the air, and he was moved to sales. We'll talk about that after the break, why he made that transition. But you started in sales and stayed in sales.
Yes, I like the money. It was fun.
It's that simple?
Yeah. I went from KIC to KWTO FM, and I was billing about $7,000 a month at KIC, being the number one salesperson. And my first order was a Get and Go, a convenience store chain. And my first order was for $5,000. And 10% commission, it added up quick. So,
that's I've told others, and I just recently completed writing a book myself, and mentioned that it didn't take me long as somebody on air to see the better cars were driven by the salespeople, and maybe that was a better place to go. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And I know other people that have done that same thing.
Hang on to that thought, Dan. We'll come back to you after the break. You're listening to Around the Ozarks Spotlight. My guests are Dan O'Day and Malcolm Hukriede. We're talking about the book, The History of Springfield Radio, and we'll be back with all of you in just a moment.
Hey, everybody, it's Ethan and Sarah Forhetz from your favorite podcast, Around the Ozarks in 5. I'm sure you've been wondering, how can I get even more amazing stories, events, and witty banter to start my day?
Well, look no further. Here we are. Sign up for our daily newsletter. You'll have what's going on around the Ozarks right at your fingertips each weekday morning.
Yeah, just go to aroundtheozarks.com, click on the newsletter tab to sign up.
Thanks for listening to Around the Ozarks in 5. We hope to see you in your inbox soon.
Welcome back to the second half of today's Around the Ozarks Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meier. With me, I've got Dan O'Day and Malcolm Hukriede, two of the authors. And I say two of what they tell me is greater than 40, right, that participated in writing this book called The History of Springfield Radio. Dan, before the break, we were talking with Malcolm about, or he jumped in as to why he didn't work on the air and wanted to be in sales. He said that's where all the money was. But you started on the air, did you not?
I started on the air in 66 at KGBX AM, went to KWTO FM in 72, and went to KTTS that same year when they fired me because I wanted some money to compete with KTTS. Went to KTTS and was with that Great Empire Broadcasting for a
long time.
72 to 99, however long that is. And great company now, of course, has been sold. But in 1975, I was making $187.50 a week and all the records I could eat. And I was 29 years old, and I said, this ain't happening. And so I went into Kurt Brown, who was the general manager of KTTS. Mm-hmm. He drew a circle around Springfield, Missouri, that was also around where the area where Mark Spinabella was selling. And he said, everything outside that circle is yours. I was on the air and I would work until 2:00 in the afternoon. And I'd leave to start working at 2:00 in the afternoon. Sometimes I have to drive 35 miles to see my first client. Mm-hmm. That was in January. And by July of 75, I was making more money as a salesperson as I was a full-time engineer.
It's a crazy business that way, isn't it? But I think that's, other than the few, the Don Imuses and the Howard Sterns and some of the ones that broke away as air talent to the big time. And, and when I say big time, the 7-figure salaries.
Yes.
Many of the others, not all of the others, when you get into markets the size of, I've had the privilege to work in Minneapolis and do work in San Diego and some of these other places. We had air talent that were making $500,000 a year in those size markets. But very seldom in a market the size of Springfield do you see that happen.
Well, you have to literally, you have to love it. You have to love the industry. And I was on the air in one way or another. I was sports director at KTTS for 7 years, and that was my ability to talk. And then when I came to Midwest Family in 2000, by 2005, I was doing a bluegrass show on a Sunday night, just because once you catch Mike fever, Malcolm never caught it, but once you catch it, you never lose it.
Well, I always said to Malcolm that he had a good face for television. Most of us radio guys never had a real face for
Look
television.
At this.
That's right. Malcolm, how did you stay away from the microphone? I'm surprised that you never had a chance to be on the air. Malcolm.
I never had any desire to be on the air. I just wanted to work my way up the sales organization from salesman to local sales manager to general sales manager. And when I got there, I just really enjoyed what I was doing.
Well, I think Dan and I enjoyed. Well, one of the things I think Dan and I enjoyed as sellers and on-air guys, Dan, I'm sure you did this too. I had a lot of my clients pay me to do remotes for them. And a lot of the remotes, even in the later 70s, we would record. And I would find myself downtown that evening having a beer with friends. And they go, aren't you over at the Champion Auto Parts store right now? I just heard you on there. But my clients loved the fact that I could do remotes for them and sell them time. And sometimes it meant a bigger paycheck.
Well, one of the things in sales is getting people to know you first, and then to trust you, of course, and then you do your very best to help them be successful. But being on the air, when I would walk into a furniture store or a store or a restaurant or whatever in in any town that was within the signal. They knew me because I'd been on the air since 1972 on a powerhouse radio station. And that I didn't have to break through that. Well, who are you? And why are you trying to sell me? Why are you trying to take me money? As Malcolm will attest, a great salesman never takes money. He or she earns it.
And the client invests it. They invest it, right?
Absolutely. So. And if it works, they won't throw you out of their business. They literally will throw money at you. And if you don't give them a return on investment, you don't deserve it. You should get the heck out of this sales business.
Malcolm, a question for you. Would you suggest that this book highlights what would be considered the golden age of radio?
Without a doubt. Just without a doubt. Most of it was before consolidation happened. There was one AM, one FM, and maybe several. Springfield's a very competitive market, but I think the 70s and 80s definitely were the golden years. Then when you got bigger corporations coming in and putting 3 or 4 FMs together and a couple AMs, and selling a cluster of 4 or 5 stations, then it became more of a numbers game, and the numbers being profit that you had to ship to St. Louis or whatever. And also we were young. We were in our early 30s and early 40s, and I tell people working for the number 3 rock station in the country, going to remotes on a Thursday night, we all had hangovers on Friday morning, but we still got up and got to work by 8 o'clock. But we had a great time.
I was the general sales manager of KWTO FM in 1990. It was the number 2 ranked radio station in all of America. Not a higher ranked radio station in markets over 150,000 people. It was amazing, the power of that FM. Rock 99 was the name of the station.
Sure. Yeah, it was a time. It was a time. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, some people hopefully watching this know what a rating point is, but in the heyday, our sign on, sign off 2554 demo was a 28 share.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Put all the clusters together. Yeah. And
that doesn't happen. Right. Yeah. Let's take a moment, because we're not going to have enough time to go too deeply into the industry on this show. We'll have to come back and do that once the book is out there. But one of the best things about our business is stories, things that have happened, either people that you've managed or people you were managed by. And if you can both keep them about as clean as you can, would each of you share one? And Malcolm, let's start with you. Just crazy story. Things that people will go, what? What?
I had a camp called the House of Sound, and they had a Beach Boy concert that night. And for somehow this owner got the Beach Boys to do a remote. And so we went out and did a remote with the Beach Boys.
Okay.
And they, the Beach Boys were leading, and Mike Love rolled down the limo window and says, "Don't we get a stereo or something?" And I went, "No." See ya.
Oh, that was going to be their payment, was a stereo?
He thought, I don't know what the manager told him, but they came, did a great, 2-hour remote, driving off and stopped and rolled down the window.
I'll be darned.
So anyway,
Dan?
That's a crazy one.
That is a crazy one. Dan,
I'll go all the way back to 1966 when Springfield City Council voted whether or not to do daylight savings time. And I was doing a talk show at night on KGBX AM, which of course no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
And this lady called in, and my air name at the time was Bill. And she said, "Bill, I don't like this here daylight savings time." And I said, "Why is that, ma'am?" And she said, "Well, I just don't like it." And I said, "Well, it's not God's time." And I said, "Well, ma'am, that was probably had to do with the railroads, so the trains wouldn't run them one another." And she said, "Well, another thing, I don't know whether or not I could stand my tomatoes can stand another extra hour of sunshine." I lost it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. You do get a chance to meet all kinds, don't you? I think that's one of the fun things about radio. And Malcolm, you got to do it too. Not so much on the air, but certainly people that come to the radio station or events that you go to. We forget that we are, for local people, about as close as they're going to come to celebrity in their lifetimes that they'll ever have. And even though we don't maybe consider ourselves celebrities per se, our job is always to entertain. And
Yes.
in the case of being a sales manager, it's to make the client feel good. And in the case of an announcer, it's to make the radio station worth listening to.
Yes, when I worked for Midwest Family, we had a general manager, Rick McCoy, who also has a story in this, and one of your great friends.
Mhm.
And he noticed that some of the announcers had put up newspaper on their windows so people couldn't look in.
Sure.
And he had them take it down. He goes, guys, we're showbiz. When we bring clients and other people, friends to the station, they want to see you. They want to see you, produce
Mm-hmm.
and perform. And I think that it really hit home with me that we are a showbiz.
I think when you read, okay, we're here to talk about the book, among other things. When you read the book, if you don't laugh a half a dozen times, and I've proofread the book, I think 4 times, and I've cried every time I've read it, with some of the stories that will just tear your heart out, and some that will, sort of like the Extra Hour of Sunshine, we've had some really, you think of Woody P. Snow, you think of Barefoot Bob Kinney, John Stevens, the guy that people love to hate. His daughter helped us edit this book, and she wrote his own story because John unfortunately passed along before we started it. I'm very proud to have been a part of this.
I would like to also thank publicly Woody P. Snow. After Dano moved away, Woody P. really stepped up and kept me energized. And then also like to thank John Kimmons, former Midwest Family employee. He did quite a few of these interviews on his own time at no cost, just as a friendship thing. So,
well, it's quite an undertaking
really
to write a
thank.
book. Yeah, to write a book is a huge undertaking. In the few minutes that we have left, we've got about 40 seconds for each of you. Where does it go from here? Where do you see radio going from here? Dan, why don't we start with you?
I think it is evolving already. It's very rapidly evolving in Springfield with the radio station cluster that I'm involved in, still Midwest. I think that radio has to, in many ways, I believe it needs to go back to some of the things that it did in the golden age of radio. But radio already, this is a podcast, for crying out loud. I think it just needs to evolve. And I think that those who are involved in radio are way ahead of the other media in terms of surviving and thriving. But it'll take some adjustment quickly.
Malcolm, your thoughts?
I think radio needs to evolve. I think similar to the way Midwest is in becoming a marketing company that has 4 FMs as a product. We did this in the early or mid 2000s and became a one-stop shop for our clients where they wouldn't have to go to a print guy or go to a TV guy or a billboard guy. The salesperson that comes out of the radio station knows those products and knows the benefits and the non-benefits out of them and can recommend a radio television station or billboard site and just become an overall help to the clients in more than just selling radio.
Dan, we're about out of time. You want to show us that book cover again? It's pretty exciting.
I hope I can bring it up quickly, just as I'm bringing this up. Because there it is.
There it is. The History of Radio in Springfield, Missouri. There it is. Oh, it looks great. And it's being printed as we speak?
It is available already on Kindle and at Amazon, and we will have it local copies. You can go buy it directly at the Museum on the Square. I'm going to jump the gun from John Sellers, and Malcolm is working out an arrangement that it'll be available at the Museum on the Square.
Well, excellent. And we'll make darn certain everybody knows when that happens. I want to thank my guests today, Malcolm Hukriede and Dan O'Day, both radio geniuses here in Springfield, and both are the co-authors of a history of radio in Springfield, Missouri. And I want to thank all of you for listening today as well. I want to thank my producers, Taylor Worley and Jay Stevens, as well as all of you for joining us. If you happen to miss all or part of today's program, you can always find it in its entirety on the MidwestFamilySpringfield.com website, the AroundTheOzarks.com site, or our new app for ATO, which can be found in Apple's apps and Android apps, which is tough to say. You can hear and view today's show, as well as all the earlier shows this year and last, on those sites. I'm Scott Meier, and remember, every day is a gift. Enjoy life. Thank you, fellas, for joining me.
Thank you.